In the modern global economy, there are only two things that actually dictate the distribution of wealth and power: energy and logistics. Everything else, political speeches, currency valuations, stock market trends, is merely secondary noise. Today, the international system is facing a simultaneous, coordinated breakdown of both pillars. In the Middle East, the physical flow of global energy is being choked. Following the direct military strikes between the United States and Iran in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz has transformed from a strategic shipping lane into an active, high-risk combat zone. At the exact same time, in North America, the physical flow of industrial trade is being deliberately strangled. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has personally intervened to delay the opening of the $6.4 billion Gordie Howe International Bridge, holding the continent's most critical manufacturing corridor hostage ahead of the crucial July 1st USMCA trade review deadline. What the mainstream media is reporting as separate, localized crises of war and trade negotiations is, in reality, a singular structural transition. We are witnessing the death of the globalized, borderless trade architecture that defined the last 30 years. It is being replaced by a brutal, localized system of physical leverage, resource protectionism, and strategic blackmail. Today, we will look past the emotional political theater. We will analyze the hard mathematics of shipping insurance premiums, calculate the energy requirements of the American artificial intelligence boom, and map out the exact strategic moves being made on the global chessboard. If you are an investor looking to protect your capital in this highly volatile environment, you must learn to read the physical board, not just the media headlines. Let us begin with the energy crisis in the Persian Gulf. Let us look directly at the physical mechanics of the global energy trade. Every single day, more than 20 million barrels of crude oil and liquefied natural gas pass through the Strait of Hormuz. This constitutes approximately 20% of the world's entire daily petroleum consumption. The strait is a geographical bottleneck. At its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are only 2 miles wide. Following the drone attack on the Panama-flagged oil tanker M/T Kiku and the subsequent direct military strikes between U.S. forces and Iran's Revolutionary Guard, this bottleneck has essentially been closed to normal commercial traffic. To understand why this is a catastrophic economic event, we must look at the hidden architecture of maritime logistics, namely the shipping insurance market. Commercial shipping companies do not operate in a vacuum. Before a supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of oil can transit the Strait of Hormuz, the vessel's owner must secure war risk insurance from underwriting syndicates, primarily located in London. Under normal circumstances, this insurance is a minor, routine business expense. But when direct state-on-state military strikes occur, and U.S. military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain are targeted by ballistic missiles, the risk profile changes overnight. Yesterday, major London-based marine insurers officially classified the entire Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman as an active war zone. War risk insurance premiums for tankers transiting the Strait of Hormuz have skyrocketed by more than 1,000% in a matter of hours. For a single voyage, a shipping company must now pay an additional $200,000 in insurance costs alone. Furthermore, several of the world's largest independent tanker fleets, including Frontline and Euronav, have announced a complete temporary suspension of all transits through the strait. This is a classic logistical blockade. Iran does not need to physically sink dozens of ships to close the Strait of Hormuz. By simply demonstrating the willingness and capacity to strike commercial vessels and nearby U.S. military support bases, they have made it economically impossible for commercial shipping to continue. The economic math of this blockade is simple and brutal. As tankers are rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, the transit time to deliver Middle Eastern oil to European and Asian markets increases by an average of 14 days. This massive delay effectively removes millions of barrels of oil from the active global supply, creating an immediate, severe supply squeeze. Both things can be true at the same time. The global market currently has adequate oil reserves in underground storage, but the physical system of distribution cannot handle a sudden, 2-week delay in transit times without experiencing a massive, rapid spike in crude prices. We are looking at the beginning of a profound structural energy shock that will drive up global inflation and force central banks to raise interest rates, completely destroying the hopes of a soft landing. While the energy supply is being squeezed in the Middle East, a remarkably similar, highly calculated logistical blockade is being executed on the border between the United States and Canada. Let us look at the physical facts of the Gordie Howe International Bridge. This massive $6.4 billion infrastructure project was designed to be the ultimate crown jewel of North American industrial integration. It connects Windsor, Ontario, directly to Detroit, Michigan, bypassing the aging, congested Ambassador Bridge and the Windsor-Detroit Tunnel. For the integrated North American automotive and manufacturing supply chains, this crossing is a matter of life and death. Every single day, more than $100 million in automotive parts, raw materials, and finished goods transit this corridor. The manufacturing system is built on a just-in-time delivery model, meaning that parts manufactured in Ontario must arrive at assembly plants in Michigan within a strict 3-hour window to prevent the entire assembly line from grinding to a halt. Canada funded the vast majority of this project, paying the full $6.4 billion construction cost under a binding legal agreement where the Canadian government would collect and retain the toll revenues until its massive construction costs were fully recovered. But with the bridge prepared to officially open, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has personally stepped in to halt the process. According to leaked internal dockets, Lutnick has directed U.S. Customs and transportation officials to delay the final safety and security clearances required to open the bridge. The official reason given by Washington is a need for additional security audits. But behind closed doors, the real reason is a direct, aggressive demand for toll revenue. The Trump administration is demanding that the original treaty be completely torn up. They want an immediate 50-50 split of all toll revenues from day one, completely ignoring the fact that Canada paid for the entire bridge. This is not standard trade negotiation. This is state-level rent-seeking and economic extortion. By holding a nearly finished, multi-billion-dollar trade corridor hostage, Howard Lutnick is sending an unmistakable message to Ottawa. If you want your auto parts and manufactured goods to cross into the American market, you must pay a direct tariff to Washington under the guise of toll sharing. This deliberate delay is already creating severe supply chain bottlenecks. Thousands of shipping trucks are forced to remain on the older, congested crossings, driving up transportation costs and creating massive inventory delays for North American manufacturers. It demonstrates that the current White House administration does not view signed treaties as permanent legal guarantees, but as flexible documents that can be renegotiated at any moment using physical choke points as leverage. This brings us to the most fascinating, structurally flawed contradiction of the modern American economic strategy: the direct collision between Trump's tariff policies and his ambition to dominate the global artificial intelligence race. To secure its technological supremacy over China, the United States is currently building massive, industrial-scale artificial intelligence data centers across the country. These data centers are not just offices filled with computers. They are massive, energy-devouring industrial complexes. A single modern AI data center can consume as much electricity as a medium-sized American city. To support this massive computational infrastructure, U.S. technology companies require millions of tons of high-grade primary aluminum. Aluminum is the absolute lifeblood of the high-tech sector. It is used to build the massive heat sinks that cool AI servers, the high-voltage transmission lines that supply power to the facilities, and the structural casings that house the hardware. To protect domestic manufacturing, the Trump administration recently imposed a massive 50% tariff on imported Canadian steel and aluminum. The goal was to force American companies to buy locally produced metal and reshore primary smelting jobs to states like Ohio and Kentucky. But this policy has run directly into a hard, physical limit of energy physics. Smelting raw alumina into primary aluminum is the single most energy-intensive manufacturing process on Earth. It requires a constant, uninterrupted supply of cheap electricity. In fact, it takes more electricity to produce a single ton of aluminum than it does to run an average American home for a year. Today, American aluminum smelters are in a desperate, losing battle for survival. They are competing directly with tech conglomerates and AI data centers for domestic electricity. Because AI data centers generate massive profit margins, they can afford to pay vastly higher electricity rates than a traditional metal smelter. As a result, tech companies are buying up the domestic power grid, driving up electricity costs and leaving American smelters with no access to affordable energy. The data is devastating. Due to high energy costs, several of the last remaining primary aluminum smelters in the United States have been forced to halt operations or reduce capacity. Last year, the entire United States produced only 660,000 tons of primary aluminum, a drop in the bucket compared to the millions of tons required by the tech and automotive sectors. Where must this metal come from? The answer is Canada. Canada has an annual primary aluminum capacity of over 3 million tons, 5 times that of the United States. More importantly, Canada's massive smelters in Quebec are powered by cheap, clean, renewable hydroelectricity from massive northern rivers. This green power is completely immune to domestic power grid shortages and allows Canadian smelters to operate at maximum efficiency, completely defying Trump's 50% tariffs. This is what 30 years of strategic complacency looks like. The United States has dismantled its own domestic energy and metal smelting capacity to focus on high-margin software and technology. But in doing so, they have made their highly prized artificial intelligence revolution entirely dependent on the physical energy and resources of their northern neighbor. Trump's 50% tariffs are not protecting American industries. They are actively driving up the cost of building the very AI infrastructure the United States needs to compete with China. The physical realities of energy and physics have rendered Washington's protectionist policies completely counterproductive. While Canada is attempting to leverage its physical energy and metal monopolies, Mexico has taken a vastly different, highly defensive approach to the trade war. Let us look at the legal text of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. Under Article 34.7, the agreement is subject to a strict joint review on July 1st, 2026, just days from today. If the three nations do not mutually agree to extend the agreement for another 16-year term, the treaty enters a highly unstable phase of annual reviews. President Trump has spent weeks threatening to let the trade pact expire, using the threat of a blanket 25% tariff on all Mexican manufactured goods to force concessions on border security, immigration, and labor laws. Yesterday, the first major crack in the negotiating front appeared. Mexico's Minister of Economy, Marcelo Ebrard, made a shocking public admission during a national broadcast. Ebrard stated that if the United States refuses to agree to the automatic 16-year extension, Mexico is prepared to accept a 10-year fallback continuation with intensive periodic reviews. In the highly calculated world of trade negotiations, this is a massive tactical retreat. By publicly revealing their fallback position before the negotiations have even officially begun, Mexico is signaling to Washington that they cannot afford to walk away from the table. They are willing to accept shorter, high uncertainty terms rather than face a complete trade collapse with the United States. Why is this significant? Because it completely changes the leverage dynamics of the entire continent. By accepting a 10-year term with periodic reviews, Mexico is essentially agreeing to a system of permanent economic subordination. It allows the United States to use the constant threat of treaty termination to force Mexico to comply with American political demands on non-trade issues, such as shutting down domestic migration routes and restricting Chinese industrial investments. This is a classic example of asymmetric leverage. Mexico's economy is so deeply integrated with the United States that they possess virtually no alternative markets. Unlike Canada, which can leverage its physical energy and raw metal monopolies, Mexico's primary economic asset is cheap manufacturing labor, an asset that can easily be restricted by American border policies. Ebrard's admission proves that the United States has successfully used the threat of logistical and tariff warfare to bend Mexico to its will, setting a dangerous precedent for the upcoming negotiations. This leads us to the final, highly compelling chapter of this global restructuring. the domestic reaction to these aggressive economic and border policies. As the federal government deploys aggressive, protectionist policies abroad, it is simultaneously deploying highly militarized enforcement policies at home. Consider the unsealed operational plans for Operation Metro Surge. Earlier this year, thousands of heavily armed federal immigration and customs agents flooded cities across states like Minnesota, executing block-by-block raids and setting up checkpoints near major industrial facilities. The administration framed this operation as a necessary measure to protect American jobs and secure the homeland. But the physical reality on the ground was a complete disruption of local economies. Businesses were forced to close, agricultural harvests were left to rot in the fields due to a sudden labor shortage, and entire communities were paralyzed by fear. In response, communities did not simply accept this occupation. A loose, highly sophisticated network of neighbors, local business owners, and legal advocates built their own horizontal, decentralized defense networks. Using encrypted messaging apps and real-time digital maps, these citizen networks monitored the movement of federal vans, set up warning systems to alert neighbors of active raids, and coordinated food and medical deliveries to families trapped inside their homes. This is what the erosion of domestic stability looks like. When a government uses militarized force to manage economic and social issues, it destroys the social contract. It forces citizens to view their own government not as a protector of rights, but as an occupying force that must be resisted through localized, horizontal organization. As the November midterm elections approach, these community defense networks are shifting their focus to voter defense. They are preparing to deploy thousands of trained monitors to local polling stations to protect voters from intimidation and ensure the integrity of the vote. It is a profound bottom-up shift in the balance of power, demonstrating that when a state pushes too far, the citizenry will build its own structures of resistance to protect their communities. Finally, let us return to the Eastern European theater, where the physical reality of logistical warfare is rewriting the boundaries of modern conflict. On this Sunday, the peninsula-wide state of emergency declared in occupied Crimea remains in full, brutal effect. Following a record-breaking Ukrainian drone strike that launched over 660 drones in a single night, the Russian-installed administration has completely lost control of the peninsula's energy and logistics infrastructure. If you examine the fuel and power logs coming out of Sevastopol today, you will find a territory in a state of absolute structural paralysis. Gas stations across the region have run completely dry. Public transportation has been halted to conserve remaining fuel reserves for military operations, and rolling power outages have blacked out entire cities. This is the direct result of Volodymyr Zelensky's 40-day influence operation. By focusing their drone strikes on a tiny 50-mile stretch of roads, bridges, and fuel hubs, Ukraine has successfully cut off Crimea from the Russian mainland. They have created a physical blockade without ever having to fight their way through Russian trenches. For Vladimir Putin, this is a massive, unsustainable crisis. Crimea is not just a strategic military asset, it is the absolute crown jewel of his political legacy. If the Russian military cannot supply the peninsula with water, electricity, and fuel, the political cost of holding the territory will become too high to bear. This is the true power of logistical asymmetry. It demonstrates that in modern warfare, holding a physical territory is completely meaningless if you do not possess the secure supply lines required to keep the lights on and the engines running. As we look at the board on this Sunday, June 28th, 2026, the underlying lesson is clear. The global order is not facing a series of random, chaotic crises. We are witnessing a highly coordinated structural shift in how power is exercised and contested across the globe. Whether it is Iran launching direct missile strikes on heavily fortified U.S. bases in Kuwait and Bahrain, the Supreme Court systematically stripping constitutional due process rights from legal residents, the White House attempting to rewrite election rules to preserve its power, or Ukraine using logistical asymmetry to choke off Crimea. The old rules of international law, diplomacy, and trade are being dismantled. In this new era, power belongs to those who control the physical realities of energy, infrastructure, and supply chains. If you are a mature citizen or investor trying to protect your wealth, you must learn to ignore the political noise on your screen and focus on the raw, physical data. That is where the truth is.